Hey there, I'm the real housewife of Snohomish County, and welcome to my kitchen. My new kitchen, that is. So here we are in my new kitchen, and I've worked really hard over the last 3 months to get this organized and everything where it needs to be to streamline my cooking process. And I thought I'd share some of those tips with you. I'm going to start out with talking about fresh produce and herbs. We go through a lot of produce in this house, especially now since we've started the Insanity program, the workout program, a lot of fresh veggies and fruits. So if you're like me, you buy too much produce and then you end up throwing 3/4 of it away because it rots or it spoils or it's never good. I'm right there with you. So I have realized that there are better ways to keep my produce and to keep it longer. So I want to share some of those tips with you. Let's start with asparagus. So I have my asparagus here on the counter, not in the fridge. When you get it from the store, you want to make sure that all the heads are nice and tight and firm. There's no limp ones or anything like that. And then I take a knife and just cut off about that much, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch off the bottom. Get a small dish, put some water in it, leave the rubber bands around it. There you go. Fresh asparagus. It's continually sucking up the water and staying alive for you. Next, broccoli. I know everybody loves broccoli, especially when it's smothered in ranch dressing. Oh my God. So what I do with broccoli is I take, and if sometimes the crown of broccoli will come on a longer stem. If that's the case, I'll use like a tall jar to put water in. But this one, they had it cut off, so I just use a little dish. Cut a little bit off the bottom so it just gives it an area to start sucking up more water. And there you go. Herbs. You know, if you watch the Food Network shows, you always see them pull them out of the fridge and they're nice, neat Ziploc bags with a little wet paper towel in there. Forget that. Keep them on your counter in any sort of a jar or a glass, or I have this cute little Le Creuset pitcher that I use. I've had this parsley and this dill, fresh dill here, for almost 2 weeks now. I haven't lost any of it. All you gotta do is fill this with water and cut a little bit off the bottom of these stems. It's kind of like when you get fresh cut flowers and you take a little bit off the bottom to kind of open it up and allow it to pull more moisture in. Now, celery is something that I have struggled with all the time. You need 2 stalks of celery, but most grocery stores don't sell it by the stalk. You have to buy the whole thing. So what I do is I take and I slice a little bit off the bottom and then put it in a container as well. I've had this for over 2 weeks and the celery's not limp, it's perfect. Same thing with scallions, anything like that. I used to put all of my vegetables and fruit in the fridge, but I've found that by keeping them out on the counter and storing them in the ways that they actually should be, they last so much longer. The apples, they're doing great over there. Tomatoes, they always have sales on tomatoes on the vine. And if you put them in the fridge, it doesn't allow them to ripen. So I buy some that are usually a little bit lighter in color and then leave them on the vine, put them in my bowl, and they ripen on the counter. It's so great. I keep all my fruits and vegetables out. The one thing, I found this tip somewhere on the internet, I don't remember where, you do not want to store your onions and your potatoes next to each other because something in the onions will cause the potatoes to spoil quicker. A little helpful hint for you. Now, let's talk about streamlining your countertops and making sure you've got everything that you need within arm's reach. Now, I've never had a kitchen with a nice island like this before, and I'm loving it. My range is right here, actually, and I don't know if you can see. I actually bought 2 cutting boards that just have this little lip on them from IKEA that go right over the top of it. So if I'm not utilizing the range, I don't lose counter space. I do a lot of prep work on here if I'm making salads or anything like that. It's great to have these. These were only like $10 a piece and they work fantastic. So on my island I have set up, I've got everything that I need for when I'm cooking. I have my knives, I have my wooden spoons, my spatulas, everything right here on my left-hand side, and my, as Amberelle calls it, thank you for coming bowl. And on my right side, I have Wanda, my beautiful, beautiful cutting board. Something that everybody should have, a bench scrape. You can use this for anything. When you cut up vegetables, gathering, cleaning up the cutting board, anything. It's fantastic. Everyone should have one. Now, there's certain things that I keep out on my countertop all the time, things that I use in everyday cooking. And salt is one of them. I usually keep two kinds of salt. Kosher salt, which is my everyday salt. Everyday go-to when a recipe calls for salt, I use kosher salt. And then I have my Hawaiian sea salt. And it's bigger crystals, and, well, truth be told, I have it because apparently it keeps the boogeyman out of your house. At least that's what the locals in Hawaii think. Then I have the following bottles. I have extra virgin olive oil and canola oil. I keep canola oil out when I'm doing something that I need to cook on a really, really high heat, and this doesn't smoke as quickly as the olive oil does, and that burns, and we don't want the fire department coming. Black peppercorns in the pepper mill. I don't know if you've seen the commercials for Frank's Red Hot sauce, but I kind of feel like that old woman in there where she says, Frank's, I put that shit on everything. Well, instead of Frank's, I use Tapatio, so I keep it out in one of these. I just buy the big jars of it and keep refilling this. I'm a little crazy. It's the Mexican in me, I guess. And then balsamic vinegar. You never know when you're gonna need to add a little splash of balsamic to something to kind of give it that pep. So those are the things that I keep out all the time because I use them on a daily basis when it comes to the oils and the peppers. I also keep a little bowl with my garlic head in them, as well as a bowl with crushed red pepper. I use crushed red pepper just as much as I use the black pepper. So that's all stuff that I keep within arm's reach for whenever I'm cooking, especially this stuff. When I've got stuff on the stove and I'm like, what can I throw in here? There it is. Sometimes you need a little sugar. I've got my sugar and my flour containers over there. Everything in this kitchen has been placed in a way that makes sense to me. So, give me a minute to gather some other things and I'll be right back. Okay, so the next thing that I tackled was my freezer. Now, we also have a deep freeze that we keep out in the garage that we buy organic beef from the butcher and we get it in big packages, and it's always nice to have another space that you can store mass quantities of food. Now, I struggle with knowing what to keep out there and what to keep in my small freezer here in the house. And one of the big things was bags of vegetables, the frozen vegetables you get from Costco. We go through a lot of corn, peas, mixed vegetables for stir fry, things like that. And I had all those big bags in my freezer taking up space. Don't do that. These little containers that you can get from the grocery store or Target or wherever, they sell them and you normally use them for canning. I use them for chicken stock as well, but they hold 4 cups of liquid. Actually, yeah, it is 4 cups. Holds 4 cups of liquid, and instead of liquid, I put corn and peas. They stack, they lay on their side. You don't have big, bulky bags of frozen vegetables in your freezer. You have 4 cups of vegetables on hand at any time that you need it. Now, spices. I have dedicated this drawer right to the left for spices. I used to have my spice rack on my wall at the condo, and I had my cute little jars that I'd gotten from IKEA. They remind me of the old time candy jars that they used to have. So I love having them right here. I don't have the wall space here, and I don't want my spices in a cabinet that I have to walk over to if I need them when I'm right here. I can just open this up and grab them. One of the spices that I use for everything is called essence, and I use this as a rub for steak. I put it on chicken, anything, and I got this recipe from Emerald Lagasse. And let me grab my binder. So I use binders for recipes that I print from the internet, and then I take them and I put them in the plastic sleeves. That way I always have them and I'm not worried about ruining them or anything like that. So now in this essence seasoning, there's everything but the kitchen sink. And I like to keep mass quantities of this because I use it so often that I make it in a mason jar. That way I can seal it and keep it in the pantry. So in this, you're going to add, and right quickly because this is all you're going to get. I'm just kidding, I'll post it on my site. You add 2.5 tablespoons of paprika, 2 tablespoons of kosher salt, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of black pepper. I use fresh ground. You can use the pre-ground stuff that you get at the store. 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of cayenne pepper, 1 tablespoon of dried oregano, and 1 tablespoon of dried thyme. Now, when you're making spice rubs or spice mixtures or anything like that, I look at the recipes for them as merely a suggestion. If you like more heat, add more cayenne. If you don't like as much heat, don't add so much cayenne. But this rub is delicious. You get so many different flavors from the oregano and the thyme, and then the smokiness from the paprika, and then the heat from the cayenne. It is so delicious. I usually do, like yesterday I made a grilled flank steak. I took the steak out of the fridge and rubbed it generously on both sides with the essence seasoning, and then I put it in a bowl or a dish, cover it with saran wrap, and leave it out on the counter for at least 2 hours. If it's going to be a lot longer than that before I cook it, I put it in the fridge. But less than 2 hours, leave it out on the counter. That allows to bring the meat to come down to room temperature. You never want to throw cold meat onto a heat source because it'll seize the meat up. You want the meat to be at room temperature. That way you get the nice sear on the outside and it cooks better. So that is today's edition of Housewife's Tips, and I hope that some of these tips will help you out like they've helped me. I will continue to think of more as I go through my day-to-day process of cooking and organizing my kitchen. I just organized my pantry the other day. What a task. So I thank you for joining me, and come back to my kitchen anytime.